and adhere to the social distancing and face covering recommendations or requirements, excuse me. And with that, I'm going to start with the, call this work session to order and start with the first one, a key strategic priorities update, and our county manager, Nicole Guillet.
All right, I'm looking for my technical team.
And technical team.
I don't hear.
Do you want me to help?
I don't know. So I'm afraid that we'll lose Commissioner Lockhart if I do anything with this computer, so I don't want to. And Chairman, maybe you want to address that.
Yeah, and
Commissioner Lockhart is with us.
you're right, she is with us, already checked, and Commissioner Lockhart, if you have any problems seeing anything that's going on, you just let us know, okay? We'll do everything we can to work it through.
I see you all and I hear you all.
And if anybody wants to know,
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Lockhart is at home under quarantine, and but we have made arrangements to have her as part of the meeting, and she will be voting like all the other commissioners.
So the commissioner
Thank
can
you
see
for
it?
making the accommodations.
It takes a village, folks.
Hello, Commissioner Lockhart.
So we have two work sessions this morning, and they're a little bit related because they both, at the end of the day, deal with funding. The first item is the key strategic priorities final report, and we've had a lot of discussion about this. You had your retreat earlier this year in March. We did a follow-up with you in May with a kind of an interim report to talk about where we were, and then we've spent the last couple of months having one-on-one meetings with each of you to further refine all of the 10 strategies or priorities and strategies related to them. So today I'm going to present to you the final report and ask for your feedback on it to make sure we're running down the right road with it. And then what I really want to accomplish today is, if you're comfortable with where we're going, to let you know kind of where we are from a financial position on this, so that we can integrate these into the budget prior to the first public hearing. So Melanie, I'm going to let you, I don't have the clicker, so I'm going to let you drive. So as a reminder here, the 10 key strategic priorities, I'm not going to run through them, this whole list, because we're going to go through them individually. And as a reminder, we did have the retreat in March. In May, we had a discussion here. And then, as I said, in June and July, we worked through one-on-one meetings with each of you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes?
the only first request I would have was that on the cover sheets, the ones that they handed out in our office, it'd be nice if the cover sheets match the cover sheets that are in the presentation so that we can correlate them easier. So just FYI in the future.
So you did get two documents, so maybe you've got two different cover
I've gotten
sheets.
several documents.
So you've got a report, and then you got a PowerPoint presentation.
True,
So-
but the individual documents that you handed out in our office, the cover sheets are different than the report, so you got to go back through and figure out where they're integrated. It'd make it a little bit easier if the cover sheet that you handed out in our office matches the report, so that you don't have to go back and try to correlate it all, just to make it easier.
Okay. I think that mine do, so we'll double check on what you got.
Glad
So we-
yours does,
okay.
mine doesn't.
Okay, we'll go back and double check on that. And anything else related to format that we need to address? Okay. So with that, we'll just jump into the first KSP, which was a holdover from the 2019 retreat. That's to develop a strategy to effectively manage development activity. And there are a number of actions related to this. Some of them, again, are holdovers from the 2019 retreat, but the most significant one, new one associated with this KSP is the Land Use Policy Vision Plan. Melanie, can you back one, please?
Sorry.
And that has actually already been incorporated into this year's budget. So in the report and also in this presentation, we've done sort of a budget outline for you so you can see all the actions related to the proposed strategies and the costs associated with them. We've already got in this year's proposed budget, we've got $450,000. So I think we've got this one covered already. in the existing budget. We do show some additional costs in the out year, in fiscal year '23.
So that's item number one?
But, yes, sir.
ASP 1.
So where does that one for the one that we handed out in our office? So it's not the learning one. It's not the is that not the integrated learning plan? It's not the healthcare.
Page 6,
It's,
I'm going by the reports they handed to us.
right. What, you got the presentation? Page 6?
True, I understand that, but you got to go through it where the affordable, you got Terry McHugh, you got development services, you got informational officers, you got resource management. I guess it's this one here.
Isn't it that one?
I'm just going by the reports that they gave to us in the office when they went through us one by one.
I get mine electronically.
That's why it all should match the way it should match.
Okay.
Joe, you want to give him your report? Have you got
Based on when the meetings were done, and they weren't.
I'm going by the meetings that you all met with me, and I wrote notes on each one of them.
Yeah, so the meetings weren't in order of priority one, so your first meeting may not have been priority
Well,
one.
I understand that, Joe, but I still go by the ones that you handed out to me in the office, because that's when we had our one-on-ones with each other.
So
Right.
this would be KSP number 1. So it would be.
But those aren't numbered when you gave it to us.
Correct, because those were working documents, and those were for the meeting, the one-on-one meetings.
Okay.
So they wouldn't be in the same order.
True, but the titles should match. The titles don't match.
Yeah, but I think what he's saying is the documents that they brought to us and we reviewed during our work meetings are not the presentation that's here today.
Correct.
That's a different
Correct.
set of documents.
And so if you wrote notes on the other, unfortunately, it isn't going to follow this.
That's my point.
I understand
So
that's
how do
your
I
point.
correlate it?
I can't answer that, but we need to continue to go through this program. So to do the best you can to go back and forth if you could.
Do we have a set of hard documents for Commissioner Delory?
Well, I got hard documents here that they handed to me in my office, but
This past week or recently?
when they met with me at the various,
Right, but that's been a while, at least
well, I
mine was a
understand that.
while.
And so I'm trying to correlate that with their presentation, and it doesn't correlate.
Is that the binder you have in the loose leaf there, the plastic?
Well, I got two binders. Which one you want to talk about? The one that they handed to me?
Which one is your latest
This
document?
is the latest one here.
Okay, I don't think we're going to get this solved as we go through this.
Commissioner, if you want to give me your notes, I could probably put them in order for you.
Sure, here they are.
Chairman, is that?
Go, please, whatever it takes, so let's move forward.
Those are the notes you gave me.
Joe, if you want, I can shuffle real quick.
I'm just looking for consistency. And those are the ones that you all brought to my office. Don't mix them up with yours.
I would never do that. Okay, give me the rest of it. Here are the first two.
Okay, so let's move on as we go through this.
Okay, so back to KSP number 1, which was the, which deals with managing growth. I think we've talked about this an awful lot. I don't know if there's a need for, just one. Any comments on this, or?
Looking at my notes, the only question that I have is that I wrote down is that I really believe we need proper staff to implement this. And I want to make sure that the proper staff in the upcoming years are there to implement this.
So I don't have included on here, you'll recall from your budget that we are augmenting the Development Services team staff. And I apologize for not including that in here. I can get you the numbers on that, but we do have a couple of additional staff members for the Planning Division, including a new deputy director to assist Rebecca.
So you feel that that's adequate?
I think it's sufficient, yes.
Okay?
And that, and frankly, that's going to help with a lot of other things as well, not just the priorities. Okay, any other feedback on this one?
Any feedback on number 1? Okay, then let's go to number 2.
Okay. Number 2 deals with improving our information technology infrastructure. Again, another priority that was established in 2019 and was refined further this year. And the priority is to address the needs of our citizens, employees, and community partners by investing in transformational technology and to create a digital-first culture in the organization. And on the screen, you'll see the 3 elements, which involve updating the website and bringing in some new technology for that, addressing the digital divide, and reimagining information services, which tends to be very reactive now, and moving that into more of a leadership role with respect to solutions in the organization. So on the next slide, that focuses on, this slide focuses on the website development. We've talked a lot about that. It is a priority for all of you. The first step in that would be to hire a consultant to kind of figure out what it is we need. Just like what we did with the CAD project, we brought a consultant in to help us develop a scope and understand what the needs were so we could hire somebody to actually develop and execute a plan. So this is, we've got $100,000 in this existing budget for website infrastructure, and that's, it's a spend we have every year. So that's already in this year's budget. We've got the proposal under this, the increases that would be required in the upcoming fiscal year involve the cost for the website consultant and also technology improvements, and then we're going to need some additional staffing to help maintain that. The one-time costs, the consultants and the technology improvements, I'm recommending that those come from the ARPA dollars. I think it's appropriate for that. It is a continuity of service issue. And then you'll see the cost in the out years are for the team that would be utilized to support that, that element of the strategy. Any questions or comments on that?
Mr. Chairman, I do.
Yes.
It seems, when we get to fiscal year 23, 24, and 25, if I'm following right, your FET increase for support is going to be about $310,000. Is that for your additional staffing to maintain what you ultimately will get up and running?
Well, some of it is staffing, and some of it is, James, can you give more details on that? I'm sorry. And some of it is technology, and I'm not a technology person.
Yeah,
so
I'm just trying to get a handle on, it looks like we're going to have this recurring cost, and if so, is this going to go into the future beyond 25?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
If you don't mind, could you pull your mask so we can hear you?
Absolutely, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yep, James Gurutsos, Chief Information Officer. Yes, it would be ongoing if we maintain that level of service. And we're looking at the 310 is 2 additional FTEs. It includes the infrastructure, whatever that is. I know, Commissioner, you and I have talked about options for that. We're still going to look into those options, but we're looking at if the consultant comes in and says, you're doing it right, but you need more.
Right.
Or we will host it completely in the cloud with someone else. Those are still options we would
Okay,
look at.
great. That's where I was headed, to make
Yeah.
sure. Okay, great,
But
thank you.
nominally, we don't know what the answer is, so we have to stick with funding.
Understood. So
Yes, sir.
just to be clear, so we are considering other options.
Absolutely.
That may decrease this number.
Or we hope-
Hopefully it doesn't increase it. But, okay, great. That's what I wanted to know.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
James.
And to follow up on, if I could, before we move from Commissioner Zimbauer's comment, we only show projections out to 25, so clearly, if you were to continue this programming and staffing, the cost would continue beyond 25.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So with this, when they talk about infrastructure, we're also looking at infrastructure in our existing buildings, correct?
This is just related to the website, correct, James?
That is
No,
correct.
I'm
yeah.
talking about the whole technology piece, not just the website piece.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So we're also looking at the infrastructure for our existing facilities, correct? Because this is technology. This is the only time you're with us in this main focus of IT. So we're looking at the infrastructure of our existing technology in our existing buildings.
Not in the scope of this specific theme.
But in the whole key initiative, is there anything in that initiative that looks at technology in our existing infrastructure?
Physical infrastructure, unless it's part of 5 points, then I'm not aware of it specifically. Yes,
All
sir.
right. So, Mr. Chairman, I have issues with, this building alone. There are dead spots when it comes to Wi-Fi. There is also times where the phone system doesn't work. There's times where there's a lot of infrastructure that has issues here in this building. I would hope that we'd be looking at this as a strategic priority, our existing infrastructure in our existing buildings as well.
Madam
So
Chair,
if-
I'm sorry, County Manager, in my discussions with you, you had said that was looked at in a holistic manner as opposed to this specific key priority strategy. Is that correct?
That is correct, and this is, these three strategies relate to website, they relate to digital divide, and they relate to reimagining how our Information Services Department works. There was not any discussion, and we can certainly add that, but there hasn't been any previous discussion with the board about infrastructure, but we can,
So the last item that you just spoke about is how we actually look at can you repeat your last item you talked about? You're talking about the digital divide.
and reimagining how our IT department functions internally in the organization.
Okay, stop right there. Now, I really believe if you're going to do that correctly, you need to look at the existing infrastructure in our existing buildings to make sure that we actually have the wherewithal, not financially, but hardware, to do that in our existing buildings.
I think that's part of what IS does on a regular basis, and so.
Well, then they're not doing it.
Can you give me a specific example of what?
Come to my office someday, try to use your Wi-Fi. Come to my office someday and look at the phones, and the phone works, doesn't work. Those are two good examples. I know IT can't figure it out. I know you've been at my office several times.
I have, and we have, when there's issues, we do go up there
Oh, yeah.
quickly and try to figure it out.
You're up there at least once a week.
That possibly could be, Commissioner. I think we are replacing the provider for the phones. That is, we've established a service level for these type of services, phone, Wi-Fi, where there's challenges. We started with the manufacturers. This building is older, it has concrete, takes a lot. You go by the density of the radios proportionate to what it is. When we have issues, we've replaced them. As far as I know, there's now one basically in that hallway for the commissioners' areas. So there may be other issues that you may be having, but from a strength of signal, there shouldn't be a challenge. So as far as service levels, if there's infrastructure challenges, absolutely, we should be replacing that as part of our normal things. To me, that's an operational thing.
Because I have to go on the clerk's Wi-Fi to get a Wi-Fi signal.
Well, if you have that challenge, please let me know, because I'm not aware of, I know you've had problems in the past, but I'm not aware of that.
I will let you know personally
Great.
as the weeks go by.
Okay. And we'll have to determine if it's an issue with the way your devices connect, or if it's an issue with the actual radio that's there. Could be a multitude of issues.
Chairman?
Commissioner Herb.
So I think there's a difference in the discussion. This is a key strategic priority. And so that is a bigger picture issue. I think yours is valid and a key tactical priority. And so I think the tactics get done at the ground level, day to day. I will report that today I could get on Wi-Fi upstairs, but typically one of the two of them works and you get on it. So I think the focus of today's discussion is not around the day-to-day issues that actually run the organization from a tactical perspective. I think we have to keep the conversation high level, or we don't ever look to the future of how we're improving bigger things.
And Commissioner, I agree with you. That's why I was trying to keep it a high level when we talked about, where IT should be going in the future, about what are we looking at from the infrastructure standpoint on existing buildings. That's high level. And that's where I started.
All right. Commissioner Herr and Commissioner DeLore both have good points. I think the fact of the matter is here, I think we have been, I think all of us have had from time to time troubles. I think that has been well documented, and we are changing the telephone systems. We are also, if Commissioner DeLore is having more of a problem than others, I think that's important that we address it immediately. But from
Just for the record, it's not user error because I've had other people have the same.
I understand. It's your office. They've got goblins in there. And but we need to move on this, as Commissioner Herr says, on a higher level on this particular thing. So, County Manager, go right ahead.
So are there any, in light of the discussion we just had, are there any proposed changes to this, or are we ready to move to the next element, or do you want to talk about?
I have one question, Chairman.
Please go ahead.
Can you give us a really high-level view of the universe of timeline? I see timeline on dollars, which could be correlated to a timeline in execution, which may not be fair.
So to hire the consultant, like the same model we used for the CAD, and to get a plan and an evaluation of what we have so that we can then hire a consultant to actually design the website, execute and everything, we estimate 6 to 9 months for that. And then the second consultant to design, put everything together for the actual website is 9 to 15 months.
So that was 3 years? Am I doing that math correctly? 24 plus 9 to 18 is 18, right?
15 months to,
25 months?
yeah, 20 to
Best case
24 months.
scenario?
Yeah, 15.
For a new website?
So a year and a half to 2 years to have it fully stood up.
So my feedback on that would be, I would love to know what the cost would be to tighten that timeline.
Agreed.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner.
does that include purchasing?
Yes.
Does that include purchasing?
Yes, that would be, include procurement.
Just want to make sure.
And I want to be very careful to manage expectations. All of us have a different level of technology knowledge. All of us, when they say improve the website, have different visions of that, and we've discussed this numerous times. So I think that as we go through this, I think each of us just needs to be understanding, and if they've got questions or concerns, and vice versa with the staff, is to keep that level of communications clear as to what is going to happen. This, I think, above anything else, is the one that we've talked more about at the retreat. Although it's not the biggest issue in our portfolio, it certainly is one that all of us would like to see improvement now, or as soon as possible. So, but again, I know for one, I don't have as much knowledge as maybe Commissioner DeLore, and therefore I probably have different expectations of what will or will not happen. So I think it's incumbent upon James and certainly the county manager to keep us well informed as to what those expectations, manage our expectations. So 6 months from now, we're not saying, well, you told us that we were going to be able to push a button and everything was going to come right up.
Well, that'd be nice.
Huh?
That'd be nice.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? But we all know that that's not true. Commissioner DeLore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible through these initiatives to do not just the initiatives and phases, but to break down each phase into sub-phases? So in other words, if you're doing a website, there's different pieces of that website that may be able to be brought online that other pieces may not. I'm only asking the question.
It's a good question, and I think it's something that we would pose and could actually include in the scope for services to give us a plan, maybe a phased plan. There may be some low-hanging fruit or some things that could be, but I'm not a website designer or consultant, so I can't tell you if that's really the way to do it or not.
Don't know.
But we can ask.
Mr.
It's a
Chairman,
question to look at.
Commissioner Zimbauer.
just to follow up on Commissioner Herr's comment of trying to tighten the timelines and see what that, and for the public's intake, because we are a government entity, it takes much longer to move and pivot. And, you know, those of us that come from the private sector, we would expect this to be done in under 6 months. Unfortunately, government doesn't work as fast as the private sector, and therefore we are bound by certain things when we go out to bid and we RFPs and so on and so forth. So as much as I'd love to see this be done ASAP, I would like to understand if there is some way to tighten up this timeline, because as the chairman has indicated, all of us since we've arrived here have indicated that this is the one area we don't communicate and integrate with our public like we should in a user-friendly fashion, as well as in-house. So I would be very interested in seeing what it's going to take to tighten that up, whether it's additional staff or whether it's funding, whatever that might be. So I would be interested in that as well. Thank you.
And Commissioner Herr.
I was just going to say, I understood, and I appreciate that. It is complicated here because we have dozens of different lines of business, and we have
Right.
all kinds, if we want to integrate our operations into the website, there's stuff that's just been here forever, and how that's all going to connect to the website, I think, is what makes it so complicated.
Right.
Chairman, I thought your comment about setting expectations is a really good one, and so I'll try to do that in a couple of ways. I have lived through a website redo very recently, and it took over a year, even in a commercial entity, and not that large of a commercial entity, roughly 800 employees. One of the things that I think we have to be prepared for is a consultant's recommendation that the new build is going to be the new build and the old site is going to remain the old site until you flip over. So this notion of low-hanging fruit is old site, not new site, and we cannot, in my opinion, have the new guy, the new consultant, tethered with old site improvements, or we will never get this done. And then the other piece of it is that we have to be very cognizant of the process by which you do this in this type of organization, where we're going to have a new website that's equally as dysfunctional as the old one. So
Very, very good point.
too many hands in the pot, not a good idea, including ours.
And I will tell you, when we did do kind of a revamp of the website a number of years ago, and we did it exactly how you described. We kept the old one up. So if there's a tolerance for that, that would probably be the better way to do it than try to,
If we don't do that, that will cost the taxpayers more money.
Yeah, you're going to have to.
And
do it
the
that way.
execution timeline will be, and I think your consultants will tell you that.
All we need is the example of the state trying to do some of their websites when it comes to, I mean, and they were spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and the first time they needed it, it blew up. So, I mean, this is something that's very important. I, myself, would rather get it right than do it fast. And that's why I said also managing the expectations, so as we're going along, we all understand exactly what's this doing. I mean, today we've had confusion already. So exactly what this is going to do and how the staff intends on doing it. I do want to say, as we go through this, because we've said, this document that you gave us, I just want you to know that for me, this has been really easy and helpful to go through. I know where it's going to be funded. I know what year it's going to be funded. I know whether it's reoccurring or non-reoccurring. So we've had some confusion this morning, but I want you to know that the document that we're looking through as we go has been extremely helpful, whether it's online or in paper. Okay, so does anybody else have anything on KSP2.
We're not done, we're only on the first element of
Okay,
KSP2.
well, I'm just saying on
Yeah,
where we
yes.
are, page 8, because if I can read, we're on page 8.
And so my one note on this is that there is a...
Amy?
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Lockhart's fine. Okay, let's, go ahead.
So my takeaway on this is that there is a tolerance for additional cost if we can get this done more quickly.
Depends on what it is.
Gotcha.
As long as it's done correctly, yes, and we all understand what it is.
Okay, moving on to the next element of this priority is addressing the digital divide in Seminole County. And this is probably the section in the final report that differs the most from the comparable section in the interim report that we gave you. If you'll recall, when we first talked about this, we had a pretty aggressive and ambitious proposal to establish this Office of Digital Equity, which would be an ongoing endeavor to just a whole separate function in the organization to make sure that that there was digital equity in the community in everything that we do here. And it is a great idea, but it is probably more than we needed to take on at this time, based on the feedback that we received from the board. So we've pared this down to two elements of this, two sub-elements of this element. And one is related to broadband, and we've talked about this under ARPA. We're proposing, and have actually finished drafting the RFP, to hire a consultant to identify gaps and needs and opportunities in the community with respect to fortifying broadband and ensuring access, as much access as possible to broadband in the community. And so we've got some money, $200,000 proposed to hire a consultant to do that, and then in the out year, we just stuck it in next year, is $4.5 million for infrastructure needs. And that money is all associated with ARPA. It's not general fund money. Hopefully that 4.5 we could divert to something else. And if we're going to do infrastructure improvements with respect to broadband, we would be able to access the infrastructure bill that's currently under discussions in the federal government. So we really we put that $4.5 million aside, and I will tell you, I'll probably repeat this when we talk about ARPA, that's half of what Orange County has allocated. So it's just a number that we kind of said we got to have a placeholder here. So that's where that $4.5 million came from. The other sub-element of this element of the priority is improving customer service in the 311 center, and that is, this is about bridging the digital divide, and not everybody is going to want to access services here or access information here via a website or some other sort of technology. So the 311 center, as you know, is our call center. It's been our hope to sort of expand the functions in that, as opposed to just being a switchboard, but to be more of a center for information and customer relations. And so the elements of here include staff and additional technology to make the 311 center more robust, and to have it be more of a resource for the community if they're looking for information or assistance in resolving an issue. So a little bit beyond digital divide, kind of also improving customer service.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner?
I have a question. At one point in our previous meetings, we talked about the digital divide and the social inequities, and there were some comments via staff, at least in my private meetings, regarding the issues with other providers providing services in that area, and it'd be difficult for us to provide either virtual services because of service districts. I know that other states are doing it, as well as other parts of the county, not the county, the state is doing it. Has anyone researched that at all?
You're sort of a few steps ahead of us here. This is just really understanding how we...
You brought up the digital divide.
Well, because it is an element of this.
Okay.
But the execution of this, right, what we're proposing right now is we hire a consultant to understand what the needs are and what the opportunities are.
So they're going to look at it from the social inequities of being able to afford broadband of the individual homeowners?
We have, in the draft RFP, we do have the issue of access, whether it's financial access or actual physical access, yes.
Is
And
it
we do
possi-
have, and I don't think I've got it, I don't think I included it, we may have touched on it in the actual report about creating, adding that issue to the services that we provide in community services, because there are a number of programs, federal and state, that provide assistance to pay for broadband. And so having that as having some information in the Community Services Department, along with all of the other assistance programs, we will incorporate that as another issue that folks could go to Community Services for to identify potential assistance in that regard.
Not knowing what the RFP or Q states, is it appropriate for us to look at it, to understand it?
You can. I don't know that, we can look at that particular issue. I'm happy to share, of course, if the board
I mean, I
wants to
just
see it.
don't know if it's going to meet the needs that I'm trying to address. That's why I'm asking. I'm
Well,
understanding what you're
As I
saying.
understand it, is your need, your concern is ensuring that folks in disadvantaged neighborhoods have access, either physically or financially, to broadband services.
That's part of it, but it's also for the future as well.
Can you define that a little better?
So if we were to subsidize for 2-3 years, because ARPA's here for 2-3 years roughly, then we've sufficiently satisfied that. But I'm looking at beyond the ARPA funds. I'm looking at what happens in the 5th and the 10th year. And I want to make sure that those are addressed from a financial standpoint.
And that ultimately would be a policy decision of the board as to how you want to.
But if we don't have that information in that RFP-Q, then we're not going to be able to do that, and we're going to have to go out for another review.
So you'll have the information about access, and both
True, but it's
from a
only
financial
access
and a
in a
physical
defined
standpoint.
Time, that's why I'd like to look at it, to make sure that I understand that we're meeting those needs of those communities in the outgoing years, whatever they are.
Understood.
Okay, Commissioner Delory wants to look at the RFP. Commissioner Zimbauer.
I
Thank
just want to
you.
make sure that's appropriate. Is it?
It's, yeah, we can share it with all of you.
Public record.
I understand that, but we're talking purchasing.
I want to make sure we're looking at the infrastructure bill coming out of DC. There's a lot of money set aside already for that.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to understand how we're going to leverage whatever funding out of the infrastructure bill, if it ultimately gets non-watered down and passed, and they can all agree to get along like little good boys and girls should, and what that actual cost would be with what we're considering here, and what monies we would use from that versus what we've got presented here today. But also, I'd like to see an action plan, how we involve the community and have community advocates out there who are helping their community understand what's actually being discussed. So we don't get misinformation about, there's going to be free broadband all the way across the county. I've heard that mentioned, so I would like to know in this process, at what juncture do you believe we would want to have community involvement from certain community leaders to help them understand and educate their community what might be going on?
My suggestion for where you would bring the community in is after we've done the assessment and we understand what's out there. And then at that point, that would be when the board would start to make policy about what you want to address and what you don't want to address. And so my suggestion would be that would be a good time, once we have all the facts and understand what the atmosphere is, what the climate is, and the conditions are in the community. I think that would be a good time, because that's when you're going to need that information and community input to make your decisions. And community input should be based on the factual information as well. So I think
Right.
that's probably the best time to bring that in, is once we've done the assessment.
So based on the timeline, you're thinking maybe fiscal year '22?
We're going to get this done as quickly as possible. This really is a priority, because my concern is we're going to have a plan and this information to access the federal funds. So
Right.
this is really something that that's why we've already drafted the RFP. We want to pull the trigger on this, because I think we're going to need to have a lot of this. And that's my only concern about circulating the RFP, is are we going to get slowed down, because we've got
Because
a
we
lot of
interfere
revisions.
with the RFP?
Well, because we've got revisions to make.
Just say it.
I'm trying to be tactful, but, I am concerned that in order to access some of that money, we're going to have the data that we're trying to get through the RFP.
So once you get the RFP out on the street, you go through the process, the consultant gets in the saddle and starts doing the evaluation. Do you perceive that to be in fiscal year '22, we may be able to go to the public and look for those
Yes.
leaders to engage them
Yeah.
and help them understand so they can help the entire community understand?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I mean, we could at least put in the RFP several community meetings.
So we talked about that internally, and I will tell you, I would prefer to have the community meetings after the consultants have
I'm not
actually.
disagreeing with you,
Yeah.
but in the RFP, it could say that to review the final product with the community.
So I think we need a better understanding of the short-term consulting role and a long-term consulting role. The short-term consulting role is around the notion that we're going to identify where the gaps are.
Yes.
And then there's a longer-term consulting role that is going to say what we're going to do around the gaps. They're two different processes.
So, and yes, and we don't know what that longer-term consulting role is going to be until we finish the short-term study
Right.
and understand. So, yeah, and it would not be my recommendation that we have community meetings as the first, when we're doing fact-finding. And we'll bring that information to you, and you can decide how much community engagement you need in order to set policy.
All right. Does everybody have their questions answered at this point? The one thing I think that's very important, and I see the two different roles and the two different RFPs. Once you finish the one, then we're going to go to the other. I think everybody now hopefully understands that. The one thing that I heard out of your answers, and one thing that's important to me, is that we are leveraging ourselves to be in the best position that when the infrastructure bill comes through, we're prepared to use what we have already put in motion to get some of those dollars to help in expanding our broadband. Just like we had talked about in the same, being prepared when this infrastructure bill for water and sewer projects.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. Continue, please.
Okay, Commissioner, I can't see Commissioner Lockhart, only you can, so I just want to make sure.
Commissioner Lockhart, did you have something? Oh, thank you. Just go ahead and speak up. You're on mute. She's fine.
Cool, great. Okay, and then the third element of this the strategy for this priority is to reimagine information services. And the way that we operate in information services today is it's a kind of largely reactive department, and we think it's really important that we think we could be more efficient and we could have better technology resources and better service to the community if we had a more robust team in IT that could work, or IS, that could work directly with the departments and help them at the very beginning in finding solutions to issues and challenges that they're working on. So we have a stepped approach, adding more staff over a series of years in what we're calling our relationship office. And these would be folks that work for IS, but they would have relationships with each of the departments, and they would be in there on the front end. And if somebody, boil water notice, we use that as an example all the time. The front end of that, having somebody from IS that has the capacity time-wise to sit with them at the very beginning to help us, instead of those of us who aren't in technology trying to figure those things out when there could be a really efficient and effective technological fix. So that is sort of in a nutshell. There's a lot more information in the report on this, but it really is an effort to make technology a bigger part of our solutions and our services to the community. So any questions or concerns with this? Okay.
Any questions? Seeing none, continue on, please.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next KSP, which is developing a strategy for capital improvements in the general fund. And this one, we're already kind of knee-deep in this resolution. We have somewhat, we do capital programming and planning every budget year. And this is related to the general fund, but we're looking at it with respect to all of our funds. This would give us a much more regimented and documented process for assessing capital needs as part of the budgeting process. As I said, staff has been working on this, and our goal is to have sort of a process and a policy in place to beta test in the next budgeting cycle. So and there includes reporting, and we want to present it in a way that helps you make better decisions about the capital needs. Any questions on that? Or there are no, we can do that with the existing staff resources we have, so there's no additional cost associated with this.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Okay.
So I want to thank your staff by, actually, I've seen the green line, red line now, so I want to thank them for that. And I want to thank their hard work. I know that Tim and Lori basically worked, as well as their other staff members behind them, worked very hard on that. That actually helped me actually visualize what's happening with the budget. I'm just hoping that in the out years that we address the issues with the green line, red line. And I'm sure that we'll be addressing that with capital as well. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Everyone is ready to move to the next one, number 4, affordable and workforce housing.
Again, this is another priority that was brought forward from the 2019 set of priorities. And of course, we want to create, diversify, and preserve attainable housing. And there are 3 elements to this strategy: the Attainable Housing Strategic Plan, which you approved and we're continuing to refine, the General Housing Trust Fund, the Community Land Trust, and then the Land Bank Program. So the Attainable Housing Strategic Plan has been completed, and as I said, we'll continue to refine that. But one of the need that we really identified with that was additional staffing to help Allison's team execute this. So we have included, proposed in the upcoming fiscal year, a revision to add a new staff person this year, and then to add another new staff person the following year, and then another person the following year. We're going to build that program. As you'll recall, you did add an attainable housing program manager in this current year's budget, so we do have one team member there. We've identified that we really need somebody with a planning background in that group to help them really understand where the opportunities are and where the barriers might be as well. So the bulk of the cost on this, outside of the trust fund contributions, which we'll talk about in a minute, is staffing. The next element is the actual the housing trust fund and the community land bank. And as you know, this fiscal year you allocated $500,000 into the trust fund as some seed money, and we've also got another $500,000 from the general fund included in the proposed budget. My proposal is that we provide an infusion of cash in the amount of $2 million from the ARPA funds to sort of fortify that housing trust fund and give it a meaningful amount of resources so that we can start really executing the attainable housing plan. The land bank, which is another part of this element, the community land trust, which is another element of a sub-element of this element, is, of course, we've talked about that quite a bit. We're doing a pilot project, 3500 Sanford Avenue. The building is no longer there, in case you haven't been by. So that nuisance is gone. We are preparing to ask for proposals from Community Land Trust. The other element that we're looking at here is the possibility of establishing our own nonprofit, where the board can't be a community land trust, but there's a possibility that you could establish your own nonprofit with you serving as the board of that nonprofit, and just it would be separate from the county government. So we're looking at that as well, which would certainly streamline things if we wanted to do the land trust projects. And then the other element, the final element, is the land bank program, which has been a priority of this board as well. We're developing a policy for that. We don't think we need to do an ordinance. Actually, we could, but I don't think we need to. And then we're working with GIS to make sure we have identified all of the opportunities for affordable housing within the county's land holdings right now. Talked a lot about all of these, so I don't know.
Questions? Commissioner Zimbauer, then Commissioner DeLore.
Are we involving the county attorney? And I ask that because he's got a very vast knowledge of these matters. are we engaging
Yes,
with
we
his
are.
office to
Yes.
leverage that knowledge in these matters?
We are, we're working, my office and of course myself, we're working with Allison and her great team. We're working together, putting together the community land trust proposals. We're working on every detail with them. And,
Great.
So,
The other thing we've
Yeah.
asked Bryant's office to help us with is we will probably be bringing a revision to the Housing Trust Fund ordinance to you so that we can expand the potential uses under that ordinance, so that we have a little more
Right.
flexibility.
and
So we'll-
I've been talking to Allison about some other things that I've been thinking about that we could possibly bring to this board in the future, near future.
Great, fantastic. And then secondary, with your GIS interaction, did they give you any timeline there? Have they given you, and the reason I ask, since I've arrived, as I shared with this board a couple meetings ago, we now have a GIS map that you can literally click on and tell you which parcel it is and so on and so forth that the county owns. So hopefully, that work will help expedite your search for viable properties for this purpose.
We are coordinating with GIS and the work that's already been done. One of the other things we're working with the land management office as well, because a lot of those properties they have covenants, or they have
Right.
or they have purchasing restrictions. So trying to, in addition to simply identifying them on a map, really understanding what the potential uses are for those properties is another part of that. But the groundwork that's already been done by GIS is very helpful.
Well, and I'd also like us to consider looking at, considering, which is done in other parts of this country, is a dual purpose when we do certain improvements to our assets. By example, I know our firefighters, am I going to scream when I say this, but, and we've talked about this before, but there are fire stations that can be multi-level, where you have affordable housing on floor 2 and 3 that does not interface directly into the fire department or where the firefighters would be. It would be a separate exit, separate entrance, as well as our libraries, for future libraries. We own the ground. I think if we could partner with some private entities, I think libraries would be a fantastic one for affordable housing, with children and those folks being able to access immediately to the library right there on site. So just a thought.
Any other comments or questions on the Commissioner Delory?
Thank you. All good comments, Commissioner Zimbauer. On affordable and workforce housing, I think, as we all know, it's very important. Just 2 comments. I think forming the nonprofit's the right way to go, so thank you for suggesting that. I know you need to do more research, I get that. I also think that we should bring in the 7 cities as well, so it's not just the county, because they could also be doing the same thing in those cities, and I just want to make sure that there's enough interaction between the 7 cities to do that.
I think that's an excellent point, and we do expand on that a little bit in the report, especially with respect to land banking. It really is important for us to marshal our resources together.
So I just want to make sure that we're looking at those 2 elements, but I like the idea that, I like the path that you had, so thank you.
Okay, are we done with affordable housing? Amy, everything? Okay. Commissioner Lockhart's good. So let's move on to number 5.
Okay,
Page 14, I believe.
Number 5 relates to leadership development, succession planning, and talent development. Again, a holdover from 2019. It mirrors what we've been talking about for the last 2 years. I'll remind you, under leadership development, we have the 3 cohorts. Succession planning, that policy was established in 2020. In the training program, we are trying to fortify that. You'll recall in the proposed budget, we do have a training officer position so that we can have a little more robust training program as well. I can get into the details, but this is another area that we've talked about quite a bit.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do support this, but I really believe that this is a management issue, and I think it should be taken off of our key strategic plans, and we should be putting it on both the county manager and the county attorney's to-do list, that's what they chose to be doing. We should not be in these weeds. And I don't think it should be a key strategic priority because it should be innate in their job description.
Agreed.
Any other comments?
Disagree.
Okay. At this, go ahead, Commissioner Hurd.
So
Commissioner Lockhart will be next.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So while they should be in every job description, they need to tie to a more strategic view of how it is accomplished. If we leave it to each department to do this on their own, we're going to have varying success throughout the organization. If we truly do stay strategic and not get in the weeds, then this is in the right place here.
Commissioner Lockhart.
So I would tend to agree with Commissioner Hurd's perspective. I would add, while we have delegated the responsibility of running the organization to the county manager and the county attorney, I think it's still our responsibility to set the tone and the priorities. And I can't count, I've lost count of how many times the county manager has asked us, give me direction. And so I think this is us giving her direction that this is our priority for the organization, especially now, even though this is a holdover from 2019. I think now more than ever, it is absolutely critical for the future of this organization that we make this a top priority for all of us. And while we are not involved in the implementation, I think it is our responsibility to set the goal and to say that for this organization, this is a key strategic priority. Otherwise, frankly, our organization is not going to sustain very long. So yes, I agree this should be in the job descriptions and it should be a part of the annual evaluations, but I think it also is a part of what we set for our organization as a priority.
Mr. Attorney. Oh, do you mind, Commissioner Zimbauer, would you like, go ahead.
I hear my fellow commissioners, and I had this debate at our retreat. This is a management issue. This board's job as commissioners is to set policy and budget. Policy is not down to the nth of each and every division in this county. I can see us being involved when our management team comes to us and says we need funding for this. I would agree with that 100%. But it's truly a management scenario. Now, we certainly, which will lead to some discussion about why has this not been a priority and happened in the past. Well, I've actually dug into that and looked at that over the last 10 years. And quite frankly, we haven't funded it. Previous boards have not funded the ability to undertake this. Now, I was not here to understand whether it was asked for or not, but I've looked at budget requests going all the way back to 2005, and there appears to be a lot of FTEs and requests that were cut along the way. That said, I've got no problem following this process, but again, this is more of a management. It's not our job to manage. It is our job to set policy and budget. And when it comes to policy, this is not a policy that personally I believe a commissioner or this board should be involved with. From a budget standpoint, we absolutely should be as part and parcel of our annual budget or any bars, et cetera, et cetera. That's my 2 cents worth.
Mr. Applegate.
Well, I will say that I think, I made a comment recently to the board that it was through your support that many of the attorneys, all of my attorneys, are very active in the Florida Bar, the local bar, Florida Association of County Attorneys. And they've done that because of your support in providing them that opportunity. In addition to that, all of them are involved in different CLE programs, continuing legal education. And I've made it a priority. since I've been here, which is, I'm in my 11th year, that there is a smooth transition plan. I anticipate there will always be organizational history in the office, and that's always been a priority. And a lot of that is due to your support. So, I know I'm separate from the county management, but I view it as an important priority. And so I know I've worked with Nicole on other issues, but for my office, I'm very confident because, and you've also allowed me to provide enough incentive for attorneys to stay in government. Recently, when I introduced the clerk, our intern, that just left to go back to school, I'd love to have him on board. Like I said, in my 40 years, he's at the top of the list. So we're always looking for that kind of talent.
County Manager, do you have any comments?
Chairman, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lockhart would like to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay. I know it's hard to keep track. I guess, anytime as a board of directors you're setting priorities for your organization, some of them are going to touch on the weeds, like a website, right? That's kind of weedy. But it's something that this board has said and given direction that we want it to be a priority for our organization. And I think that that is what this is saying, is that we recognize that this needs to be a key strategic priority. We are allowing and need to allow the county manager and the county attorney to execute it in the way that they see fit, because we have said that we trust them to have those CEO-type roles. But I don't think that this is in any way out of our bounds for us to be adding it as a priority for our organization. I think we're commingling, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I think that both can be true. I think this can be a part of their roles and responsibilities, and it can be a key strategic priority of this board, just like some of the other things that we've listed here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. County Manager, do you have any?
So regardless of where this sits, this has management buy-in, so regardless of whether or not you include it in your list or it moves to our list, it's going to be part of us. So I would just kind of ask the board, what do you want to do?
Yeah, so did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I would add one last thought, and that is that while we actually need to do succession planning as well. And so I would make a case that leaving it in the strategic planning document for potential future boards may be beneficial to county staff to avoid exactly what you just described as lack of funding and lack of engagement. That if a future commissioner, and I say this as the new guy, that if a future commissioner sees that this was important to prior boards, that changes the view of it as opposed to county management saying this is important to me and here's why. So I would advocate for leaving it and we stay out of the weeds. Always an awesome thing.
And I have no problem leaving it from a funding standpoint.
Okay.
I think that's
Commissioner
wise.
Delory had his hand up.
He can jump in. I mean, I'm not going to tell him he shouldn't, but I wouldn't tell
All
him
right,
not
let
to
me
fit.
give
I didn't see his hand.
Yeah, I know, it was kind of like a small hand.
We need a light with buttons.
Okay, let me give you my take on this so that we can move on.
Can I speak? Then I'll.
Yes, you can speak now.
What I was going to say was that this is a priority on all levels for all of us. Getting into the weeds is what I'm concerned about. I think we should make it a priority on a funding standpoint and by title only, but the actual implementing this should be up to the county manager and the county attorney. We should only be responsible for the by title only and the dollar figure. That's my concern.
Okay, my take is similar, but let me kind of go a little bit further. I first of all, it was on our priority list, and that's why it's here today. So before we got into that discussion, we really should go to the main discussion that the county manager wanted. Do you have any problems with the plan of action that she has put forward here? And I don't think we do, because there hasn't been any discussion of that. So the next thing is kind of like the weeds, the no weeds, and frankly, internal leadership succession and development obviously is a process of the county manager and the county attorney. Strategies on talent development, however, I think is something that is very much something that we should be involved in, because the county manager needs us to help prioritize what the talent development would be, because that will require funding. So I see this maybe not, and I know that the number 1 through 10 doesn't necessarily, reflect that we're going to worry about 1 a lot more than 10, but I don't see this as a 5, if you will. I think it needs to move back, and I think we should be more involved in the talent development, not necessarily the leadership development and succession internally. I saw Commissioner Herr's hand raised.
I think we have semantics here, and I think we probably, this is an English lesson spoken by the person that's married to the English major. So when I look at leadership development, that is talent development. It's in the blue box, it's not on the right side, but I decided I wasn't going to get into that. I think keeping the best and the brightest employed in this organization should be the mission of the board, and we need to keep it as a priority focus.
And I will tell you, it is here because the board came up with it. It was tied, 4 and 5 were tied. If you'll recall, you ranked these, so they kind of are in ranked order from the board. That it certainly doesn't mean that you can't change your minds and that when you delve into it, but I don't think I mentioned that when we opened this up, that these are in your order of priority. At least what your priority was in March.
Commissioner, is that a hand raised, or is that just your?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
I'm done picking my nose for a moment, but anyway.
Thanks for the warning.
My question is, talent development, the dollar figure you have is $130,000. How realistic do you think that is? And the reason I ask that is with the amount of employee count we have in this organization, and if we're going to do talent development, which means updated training, exposing some of these individuals that are identified for moving up the ladder, will take additional training and so forth. I don't know that's enough money.
So we'll take more money. This is an increase.
Understood.
But there are some metrics out there for what you should be spending per employee.
Right.
And this is below that.
Oh, it's cool.
Probably significantly below that. That being said, there hasn't been historically a big investment by the board in that respect, so we thought that this was a good amount to get us started and to assess what our needs are, in addition to having a trainer. And I'll tell you, we have leadership development and talent development separate, and I'll tell you why they're separate. Leadership development is handled through the Office of Organizational Excellence, and talent development is handled through HR. So they're connected and certainly coordinated. They sit right next to each other, but just so you know, that's why they're separate. They're a couple of two different programs in 2 different offices, but very much integrated and
Which brings me
coordinated.
back to my original statement. In my review going all the way back many years, there doesn't appear to have been a will of the board to fund for this priority or for this need. And so what the county manager has just indicated, that this number is below the average, it's below the standard, and it is a number that is brought forward to us to consider because it's an increase, but not too much of an increase. And what I really want to know is, I don't want to create and go back to old ways or old habits of not funding properly and appropriately the true need. I have zero interest in throwing pennies at a dollar problem just because it looks good on a presentation and staff's doing something. So I would like to have, whenever, a next update some realistic number that's been identified for this area and what your expectations are that you're really going to spend per employee to get there? So we have a better handle.
Joe just made a point that I neglected to mention. The departments all have training budgets too, so this is just so you know, this is
Understood.
an addition, but we're happy to bring you back some, look at an increase here if the board is amenable to that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I have Commissioner Lockhart, then Commissioner Delory. Commissioner Lockhart.
So a historical reference is always important, and I was with the county when training and development was a very large priority, and we had an entire department and multiple FTEs devoted to it, and then the Great Recession hit, and things changed, like a lot of things. And so, unfortunately, the look-back period includes a very bleak time financially for the organization. But I can tell you, it was a very robust, very important, prioritized part of the culture of this organization for many, many years. And this isn't just about, throwing money at training. It is about culture development, and that's the piece that we have to rely on the county manager and the county attorney to flesh out. The policy piece of this that is important, that relates to, recruitment and retention, it really does, whether we like it or not. I'm talking to many, many organizations, and great employees are being pulled away for offers of $15,000 to $20,000 more than their current salaries, and they're being allowed to work from home. And there's just an entire culture shift that's happening in the workforce right now. And if we're going to compete for the talent that we need in this organization, it is going to take this board's involvement. And I'm not talking about getting in the weeds, but I am talking about being able to listen to and really listen to the suggestions that the county manager and her team brings forward to move this organization into this next new wave of recruitment and retention. So I know we're spending a lot of time talking about this, but this organization only runs because we have excellent people in it. And potholes don't fill themselves, and sidewalks don't lay themselves, and fires don't put themselves out. So this is all about finding the best and brightest to serve the citizens of Seminole County, and I don't see how it can't be a huge priority for this board. And if the county manager wants to bring back a revised plan that increases funding in some of these areas, I would be open to hearing it.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to expand on what Commissioner Lockhart talked about, if you don't mind, Commissioner. Back in 07, 08, when we had the big turndown, we did have a department that just focused on this. It was a good department. They did a lot of really good things. People would sign up for training classes on a regular basis. I remember several times Fran would put on her calendar that she went to, and I don't remember all the classes she went to, but different classes periodically because they were offered. And I remember talking to various departments, to people who were scheduling training classes. So I'd like to know exactly what we were spending back then, because what we did to help cut the budget back then, because we really had to cut a lot of money. In fact, we laid off a lot of people, and I'm not insinuating that at all, but I'm just telling you a little bit of history. We laid off a little over 200 people. Those are some dark days, and to get that number down to where it needed to be, we took that training and we pushed it down to the departments. That's how that all happened, from what I remember. We also had a great educational reimbursement plan, so that people, if it was related to their job, they could go back to whatever continuing education that they wanted to get a full degree. I'd like to know exactly what we were spending back then, to at least make sure that we're spending that number, at least what that is. But again, we should not be getting into the weeds of this. This should be by, and I hate to keep on saying it, by title only, and we should know what that dollar figure is so we can commit to it budgetarily, and then it's up to the managers, not the county manager and the county attorney, to implement that. But I'm okay with understanding what we were spending in 07, 08, what are we doing with the educational reimbursement plan, but just in title only. It's up to them to implement it. But that's my 2 cents. And that's the reason why all that went away, was because of the Great Recession of 07, 08. That whole department almost basically disappeared, and that got pushed down to the different sub-departments in the county, and they actually handled it on their own budget.
Commissioner Hurd?
I just want to point out that the fact that it's in here created a really healthy dialogue, and while we attempted to resist to get out of the weeds, we still got in the weeds. That's on us, not on the county manager. I think we've given direction, and that is our role. So I love that we had the conversation, and I think this facilitated it. When it's in a bigger budget discussion, I think we lose it.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Yeah, all my expectation is our county management do what they need to do for the entire organization. Just tell me what the dollar figure is. That's all I really need to know. I don't want to tell you how to do it, why you should do it. I think that should just be automatic with our management staff.
And I think there was a good recommendation by Commissioner Delory just then. Let's see what we did do back in the 2007, 2008 fiscal year and before, and see if there's things that we're working and if we can duplicate. But I think that you do have direction, and this was a healthy dialogue. And despite the fact that we got in the weeds, I think this needed to be flushed out. And so we look forward to, now that you've heard some of the conversation, that maybe you and our attorney can come back with some ideas and kind of focus on keeping us out of the weeds while moving forward with this particular thing. Okay, let's go on to number 6, management of general fund reserves.
So this is another item that we've had a lot of discussion on, and it's actually almost wrapped up. We've had a discussion work session on general fund reserve policy, and it's Lori's intent to bring something to you within the next month or two to finalize and formally adopt. And I think that the proposed budget that you'll consider in September for adoption is reflective of the discussions that we've had. So no additional cost associated with this. As I said, we're at the finish line on this one.
Questions, comments? Seeing none?
The
Go
only
ahead.
comment that I have, sorry, Mr. Chairman, would that I would hope that this would also have some interaction with a true integrated fiscal plan for our future years. It doesn't say that, but it should.
Okay,
Can I explore that a little bit?
sure. That's what we're here
You talk
for.
about projecting how far out?
So if we're talking about general fund reserves, which is what this category is, we should have an overall fiscal plan for the future, so we can actually, in that fiscal plan, actually manage our reserves. And
Sure.
they should be interacting each other.
So I think we've touched on this before, we need to probably look at our reserve policy,
That would all be in there.
and maybe that needs to be adjusted or agreed upon, what we do, leave it like it is or adjust it accordingly. I
We
think,
haven't formally adopted it yet, so
right.
we have a proposed revision to the existing general fund reserve policy that we will be bringing forward. It's imminent.
Sure. Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Everybody good? Yep.
And I will just point out that this priority works in conjunction with the priority for the capital, identifying capital needs. So that'll tie into that overall fiscal plan as well.
All right, let's go on to number 7.
Number seven is a new one, a new priority identified in this year's retreat that was not identified in the retreat of 2019. So we were kind of starting from scratch on this one, and I appreciate all of the staff involved because we really were flying a little bit blind. So this has four components to it: the community health assessment, the Healthy Lifestyles Initiative, the community mental health program, and the community paramedicine program. And In the report and also in this presentation, I've broken those up into two different parts. Community paramedicine, I kind of set to the side, even though it's certainly a part of the community health initiative. It is a really pretty much fully baked proposition now. The other elements, the community health assessment, as you're all aware, the health department, the Seminole County Health Department does a community health assessment. And if we're going to start an initiative, clearly we need to understand what the needs are and what the status is in the community. So we believe that the first thing we need to do is take that assessment, workshop it with the board. Is it, give you the information and also understand if there are areas that are not being addressed that you would expect us to address. So identifying those so we can fully understand the issues that this board wants to tackle. We would do the same thing with the healthy lifestyles element of this, understanding what's going on in the community, where there might be gaps there as well, what the county's role is with respect to that. Likewise with the community mental health program. So on all three of these, the first step is to learn and understand the current status and then to identify what the priorities will be for the board. So there's planning before programming with all three of these. So that's what the initial spend reflects. And these three elements will land in community services. We decided that although most of you met with Chief Drozd on this, he was the team leader on this particular priority. These three elements we determined would probably be best suited in the community services department. So Allison has identified the need for additional staffing to take this on. We do not have any public health professionals on board right now. So she's looking at the real cost associated with this initially is some additional staffing so that we can tackle these and understand what the needs are and administer this fact-finding and assessment part. You'll see in the next fiscal year, there's $500,000 allocated for mental health programs and $800,000 for community health initiatives. As a reminder, when we talked about ARPA, and this will roll into our later discussion this morning, we identified $1 million for community mental health programs and partnerships, and then $1 million for the community health initiative itself. So I took half of the money for the community mental health initiatives and partnerships and attached it to this program. There may be some things, another $500,000 worth of things that we do that are not directly associated with this. And then the $800,000, you'll see in community paramedicine, I took $200,000 of the $1 million that we had designated in our discussions under ARPA and use that for the startup equipment costs for the community paramedicine program. And we can talk about all four of them together, or we can talk about these three and then move to community paramedicine, because I think they're connected but different.
I'm good.
Everybody okay? Commissioner Zimbauer?
Just a point, and thank you very much. I want to make sure that after we've done our sampling for the need in the community, and we have a better understanding of what those needs and where those gaps are, that we make sure we engage our health partners and the other stakeholders, by example, the sheriff's program with the mental health awareness, and mental health and the drug treatment, as well as our 501c3 partners in the community to leverage and help understand what everybody's doing so we're not duplicating. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, sir.
You're going to go out, you're going to find
That's
out
exactly what you're hearing.
who's doing what and where real needs at, and then try to plug that hole, as well as work with our stakeholders on some of those areas maybe they're already doing, but they're not quite there to the level they want to be.
And we won't know this until we do the assessment, but my expectation would be any programs that we have would be in partnership. We would not be flying solo on community health related programs. They would all, this initiative is really about partnerships.
Great. Thank
Commissioner
you.
Hurd?
I think when we talked about this in the workshop, my suggestion was around the notion that we should be the connector or convener, because there are giant disconnects in the community, particularly with regard to social determinants of health. And And so I think that's where this is headed. The only piece of your conversation that caused me any level of concern is the notion that you're going to come to this board with a work session and ask for direction. And I would ask that you come to this board with a recommendation at the work session, because your team will have done all of that work, and we could absolutely take that sideways.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner?
I would agree with Commissioner Herr that on those work sessions, it should be brought back to us. And I'm just recapping what you just said in my words, and that it should be brought to us with their findings and their recommendations so that we can move forward. I think
So
that's what you
I will
said.
revise my word from direction to feedback.
Okay, Commissioner Lockhart?
Yeah, I'll echo that just for the emphasis. I think that some of how we get sideways, and to Commissioner Herr's point, can undo potentially what staff has put in a lot of work doing, is we really do need the county manager and her team to come forward with recommendations and not, and maybe it is phraseology, but when we're asked for direction, we can give you all kinds of direction. So I think it's really imperative that it come with a strong recommendation of this is what we have determined as a team with the experts that we've convened. I'm just adding emphasis there to the conversation.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
And just to add on to that, I would simply say, in an untempered fashion, meaning give us the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Unfiltered?
I don't want to hear what you think we might like.
I'd like it tempered but unfiltered, just saying.
I like it raw.
I would always like, and always would expect the staff to give us their recommendations without counting votes, if I heard what Commissioner Zimbauer and others have said, and I've always said that previously, because that is extremely important. I think that just for the sake of my personal satisfaction of this issue as it came before us during the retreat, Commissioner Herr brought this up. I think this is another one where everybody would have a different expectation as to what we were talking about. I think the staff really focused in on some key ingredients to make this successful, so I congratulate them. I just wanted, before we moved on, Commissioner Herr, is this the vision that you kind of had when you brought this forward?
Yes, connector and convener, not program
Perfect.
runner.
Perfect. And I think we're all on the same page on that. So congratulations, staff, clearly moving in the right direction. Number 8.
Wait, can I have number 7?
Oh, you want to finish with number 7?
Can we back? Yes.
So we did.
So this is the community paramedicine program, and I'm going to ask, is the chief here? I think we might have a number that's not correct on this, the first line, the ongoing operating supplies.
It's not $858,000.
I don't think it's $858,000. I think
It's $58,000.
Mr. Chairman, I think we just need to give them the latitude, that if there's a Scribner's error,
Yeah.
they just correct it.
I think
and move
it might be a
forward.
significant Scrivener's error, so we'll get that
Trying to be polite
corrected.
right now.
Just shy of $1 million?
Yeah. So we'll clarify that for you, because I have some different numbers. But on this, as I mentioned before, we have some ARPA dollars rolled into this as well as fire fund dollars, and we'll make sure that we've got the right numbers in there.
Thank you. Okay. I think we all understand that, and we'll look forward to the new numbers. Now let's move on to priority number 8.
So priority number 8 is continuation of the 5 Points project. I don't know, I think this is in here just so it stays top of everyone's mind and that we do keep this project moving. I have included in the report the schedule and the anticipated funding, but we are continuing to move forward with this. There's not really a strategy other than the strategy that we've already given you in the master plan, and the timing schedule that we've given you, as well as the anticipated funding. So any
questions on number 8? I think many of us have had meetings individually with, as we discussed at the last meeting and work session and discussion and update. So, and I think they continue. I still have not gotten mine, but I'm trying to set up a schedule for it. But I think we all have gone through this rather extensively. So let's move on to number 9.
Number 9, again, an issue that was part of a result of the 2019 retreat. That was increased engagement with regional partners. This really is, the strategies under here are really just about being more mindful about the opportunities and more mindful of managing regional relationships. There is a small funding component of this. We'd like to be able to sort of formally track this. And again, this is really about being mindful and understanding where regional partnerships can be beneficial to the community and identifying that up front before we start tackling issues. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but I think this is something that's important both on a staff level and on a board level.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one that should be on a staff level and not it as a staff a commission priority. Clearly, I think that each of us know our parts in ensuring that we are in leadership roles in regional partnerships, but that's not something that we need to have as a priority. Does anybody else have any comments on that? Commissioner DeLore and then Commissioner Zimbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with you. From my experience, I can tell you both, and I'm going to point out two persons, I shouldn't say point out two persons, John Dredge and Paul Chipak. They keep me up to speed, and they were very involved regionally. I can tell you, I hear from other regional people that they're talking to not just DOT, but to other counties in the region, as well as Metroplan and Sunrail people. So it's up to the staff to do that, and I think that as long as we put this on the county manager's plate, that she should be encouraged, or whoever the county manager is, should be encouraging that interaction, as well as the county attorney. They're doing that, and I think that it should be continued to be fostered. And I know that Rebecca has reached out to Orange County when it comes to development in the Orange County area. So thank you, Rebecca, for doing that as well. So there's a lot of different people, but as you said, this should be on the county manager and county attorney's plate.
Commissioner Zimbauer.
I concur with the chairman's thought process on this. You know, most all of us as commissioners already sit on regional boards. Many of us, if not all of us, are in leadership roles on those boards, multiple boards. So we're in touch with our fellow elected officials throughout the region. And albeit we may be at Metroplan, we do have the opportunity to discuss other things throughout the region, not specifically to Metroplan or some kind of regional planning council. We have those already happening at the board level, so I would concur completely.
Any other comments? All right, let's move on to number 10.
So number 10 is, before we move to number 10, we're on number 9, there was some discussion about having it in as a priority, not having it in as a priority. Did I misunderstand that?
I think the chairman...
I think that we're talking about that this can, we understand how important it is. We don't need it as a specific priority within this.
Okay. So are we leaving it as a priority or taking it out as a priority? I just want to
Go ahead,
understand what
Commissioner
the...
Herb.
I'm just going to say I'm perplexed by this, so I'll own it. This is I think my third or fourth workshop. All of a sudden now we're pulling stuff out that prior to me getting here was already established as a priority in terms of giving direction. I have a great amount of empathy for staff in terms of feeling like, which way am I going today? The fact that it's in here doesn't mean that we're micromanaging it. The fact that it's in here says that it's a strategic priority for us to keep these good relationships. We can just move on from it and leave it in here. That's my suggestion. But this notion that we pull in, pull out, I just don't understand, that is not a strategic plan if that's what we're going to do. We either need to vet it more aggressively up front and have it never hit the plate, or leave it on the plate until we feel like we have sufficiently addressed it and move on. And I haven't heard anybody say we've sufficiently addressed any of this stuff. It's just that, yeah, we don't need to be in those weeds. So I'm just confused by the process.
I think that's a fair, analysis. However,
Fair confusion?
yeah, fair confusion. However, I think that what we're saying, we added some priorities. I guess a lot of them need ongoing and continuing work. I'm looking at this as one that really does it. I think we all understand the importance, whether it's at our level or at the staff's level. I think we have done a very good job, and it's not something that we have to keep an eye out for at this point. And I think that's what I was saying when we're talking about a priority. The others need ongoing and continued analysis, massaging, work effort by the staff and by the commission. And I don't think that, I mean, it's not a big deal to kid in or out. I just don't see it as a priority like the others.
Well, it sends
Commissioners
a
are-
message. It is a big deal in terms of it sends a message. Either it's a key priority or not a key priority. These are the 10, that's the whole process that we're in. So that's the piece that is a little bit
So
concerning.
for Commissioner Hur's benefit, I think this was one of my priorities back in 18, 19, whenever we first did this. And because what I learned as a commissioner and being a new commissioner, in going to attend my board appointments, some of them which have technical aspects, which are better suited for staff, I observed where our other partners through the region had staff at the meetings. We didn't have staff at the meetings. So it was beholden on me to then gather all the technical data, bring back, give it to somebody in staff and go, hey, this is what's going on. We need to get up to speed because Orange County's doing X, Osceola County's doing this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Since raising that, at least on the boards that I sit on, staff's pretty well engaged now. So there may be room for improvement there, but I think we also wanted to make sure, by example, this whole COVID thing that we've gone through almost 2 years now, is, those partnerships that we have become strengthened, and the ability to us to communicate across the region, I find very helpful. But I think staff needs to be, of course, engaged in those areas, like the ME board, which will be tomorrow, which I've got to go to Ocala for. There'll be staff there as well, and staff has been there. And I think that keeps continuity from the standpoint of when commissioners change, if there's no staff member there that has recorded and tracked, and then it's just like, hey, the new guy coming in is like, what are y'all doing? What did you used to do? What did the last commissioner do? That was my purpose for bringing it up back in 19, because it was very clear to me there was no continuation of historic knowledge, nor the technical aspect, whether it be engineering or community services or whatever it might be, all fell on the shoulders of a commissioner to come back and then report to staff, and then staff report back to the commissioner. It just was not an efficient scenario.
Chairman?
Yes.
So,
And can I just say, Commissioner Lockhart's had her hand up, and then
Oh, I'm
I'll
sorry.
her, and then
We
to
can't
you.
see
Go
her.
ahead, Commissioner Lockhart.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I just figured you guys didn't need to see my big head up on the screen the whole meeting, so.
Nope.
thank you.
So what I'm hearing and what I'm reading on the slide aren't matching. So I'm somewhat perplexed, like Commissioner Herr. I don't see increased engagement with regional partners as attending meetings. I think that this is an and I also didn't think that this list was a list of things that we were going to see accomplished and then checked off and then taken off the list. Like, this isn't a grocery shopping list that, okay, once we put the milk in the cart, we're going to cross it off. These are the things I think that we are wanting to keep on a list continually in front of us and our organization to say that these are ongoing priorities, that we will continue to look back and tie back the work that we do continually to make sure that we're staying on track. You know, this, whatever the agenda item is or whatever the function is, this ties back to key strategic priority number 9, where we're developing relationships and we're integrating performance management into regional partnerships to improve outcomes. That's so much more than attending meetings. So I'm a little bit with Commissioner Herr in that I'd almost like to have Hardy Smith come back and appear and say, you know, okay, guys, you're either on track or you're off track, because I feel like we might be missing something here.
Commissioner, before you go, let me just say, I'm sorry I brought this up, this particular one, because we spent more time on it than I would ever think that we should have. We all understand what this is. We're all moving in the right direction. Maybe this discussion of what the priorities are, maybe we wait and here they are, here's what we decided at the retreat, and maybe next year's retreat we will look at and decide what those priorities are then. And let's not spend a lot of time, again, analyzing whether something should or should not be on the list, or whether we're getting into the weeds, and we've said all that 100 times tonight or today. But let's, you know, I don't see this as something that is as important from a standpoint of it needed to be addressed right away, because we are doing it, but I don't have any problem with us all recognizing that this is an important priority. Okay, that's it. So can we move on?
Sure.
And one moment, I want to apologize for glossing over it, because there is some substantive stuff.
Then let's go and
More
do
than
that.
attending meetings in here, but I think Commissioner, and I understand what Commissioner Zimbauer is saying, because we talked about it. It's not just being at a meeting, but it's being engaged, and so I think we've tried to capture that as well as other opportunities in the actual discussion. So now we can move on, if that's all right. Okay. Number 10, the last one. We've made it through. Hopefully we won't get stumble here.
Not yet, we have.
You're so positive, Mr. Chairman.
I am.
He's
So-
just setting expectations.
That's right.
Well, I haven't gotten to the best part yet, so so number 10 is develop a holistic water policy. And this, along with the Community Health Initiative, was a new priority that was developed in the retreat this year. It was not present when we talked about it. It wasn't something that had been identified in 2019. And this was sort of, came up at the very last minute of the retreat, and we didn't get a whole lot of direction on it. So it's been a struggle, and I congratulate Terry for just digging in, and the staff that worked with him on this, because I think they did a great job. And so the cornerstone of this, we do a lot of water projects, and we do a lot of water quality and water conservation and other projects. But in talking with the board, I think the intent here was to have a plan where we take stuff that Public Works is doing and things that Environmental Services is doing, and having an integrated, holistic plan. And the elements that we identified of the plan are to protect water, secure supply, enhance conservation, protect the public health, and to maintain affordability of water resources. So most of the projects that are included in your list are projects that are already either in the capital improvement plan, Public Works or Environmental Services, or are anticipated to be in the Environmental Services master plan that's currently in the final stages of development. One thing that is not, that we haven't done, and is already an item in the proposed 22 budget, is to actually do the plan and to bring all the stakeholders together and have a strategy that addresses those 5 issues that I've raised, and see how those projects can work together and really do something that's more integrated. So our intention is to bring somebody in to help us get the stakeholders together and to develop a plan that really identifies how we manage one of the most important resources we have here, both the surface and groundwater. The one item that is in here on the project list that has not been funded or addressed and I know this is why the chairman probably said what he said, that's not been addressed in the master plan or in a capital plan is septic to sewer conversions. And those are things that I hope that we can work on. This infrastructure bill creates a great opportunity for that. ARPA, unfortunately, is not the best vehicle for that because of the limitations on matching federal funds. But that is something that we did identify in here in out years. It is one thing that's on this that has not, in addition to the actual plan itself, which is in the proposed budget, that we don't have plugged in for funding somewhere. So this is a sort of to be continued as we develop that plan, which will involve considerable stakeholder involvement. This may change, and more policies may be developed, but I think it's going to be a great initiative for this community. I'm excited about it.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Thank you. In looking through my notes and my meeting that I had with staff, and I'm glad that we finally acknowledged that we need to be a One Water member. So thank you, Terry, for putting that in there. But also need to allocate staff time, because people may not realize that there is a substantial amount of staff time with being a member of One Water. And I know Terry's nodding his head, but that's right there is just the membership. There's also staff time involved with that. The other things that I've noticed that is not in your list of things here, Terry, and I know we spoke about it a little bit, is the water wheeling report that was done years ago. I want to make sure that that's somehow integrated with this. And if it is, that's great. I just need a yes or a no.
For the record, Terry McHugh, Director, Environmental Services Department. All alternate water supply alternatives, including water wheeling, are addressed in the master plan. I didn't call it out specifically in this list, but it's on the table.
And the reason why I'm calling it out is because you're having specific titles here, and I just want to make sure that that's somehow interacted as well.
Okay.
And as well as the interaction between your group and John Dredge's group when there's road projects. That's how the water wheeling project works.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that that's articulated somehow. When it talks about Lake Jessup shoreline, it's not just the shoreline, it's the complete Lake Jessup. And so that needs to be somehow articulated in here as well, however that is.
Yeah, and that'll be fleshed out as we develop the articulated holistic water policy
And
plan.
that's,
Yeah.
and that's fine, because I'm just going by what you're talking about grants, because it's more specific about the holistic approach to Lake Jessup. And then in your presentation with me, you did talk about on page, let me go to page 9 of the presentation in my office. It wasn't page 9, excuse me, where was it? It was page 11, where we talked about different options of water meter replacements. We talked about additional options, and I want to make sure that that's somehow interacted in this plan.
I've already discussed that with the vendor, yes.
Okay. And then the last thing that I have is, I want to make sure that in the holistic approach that we're looking at the springs, because it's hinted, but it's not really articulated.
Yeah, so my vision for the big idea number 2 is protect water resources.
I
That's all.
understand that, but it's hinted, that's why I said
Okay.
that. It's
Okay.
not clearly identified, and that's where the One Water issue initiative comes in. And I'm glad that we're going to become a member, because if we're not going to become a member, then I don't think that we should be using their literature or their name.
Very good.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, let me just say, because this is something, as you all know, is kind of a passion of mine. The reason at first I brought it up is because I understood we had a number of different things going on throughout this county in various departments. And putting together a holistic plan, just like, we should in the state of Florida, is extremely important to know where we are and know where we're going. It is extremely expensive, water projects. We understand that. But we also understand that if we, it's going to be a lot more expensive later on. And so for not to be prepared, number one, for when opportunities show up, both at the state and the federal level, and also to not plan for what we have to do today to ensure that our children are not paying for our mistakes is extremely important. And this is a great step and a beginning step, and I just wanted to say that, look at 3 pages of projects, or 3 pages on this one thing. This is moving forward, as I'm glad to see that we're doing. So I just wanted to let everybody know that this is something very important. We all know that. I don't want to dwell on it, but it's good that we're starting to see it all in one place.
Very good.
Okay. Anything else? Commissioner Zimbower?
Just a general inquiry with staff. With these KSPs that we've given to you and have carried over from previous years, a couple things. With the distraction and the unfortunate scenario of COVID, how has that impacted staff's ability to act and get some of these KSPs to a manageable staff level working state?
It's been a challenge, and if you'll recall, when we did the retreat in March, I gave you sort of an update of where we were on the 2019. We do track those activities internally, and COVID impacted that without a doubt. And that is in part why you see some on these new things, we're asking for so much additional staff, because we learned that trying to do that and be prepared for everything else that's going on in the organization and in the world, in order to really accomplish what it is you want us to accomplish through these, we're going to need more staffing resources. And I think the one thing that we didn't do as well as we could have in 2019 was asking for those resources. So that's why you'll see a number of new staff positions being asked for in this proposal here.
Okay. And how,
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Commissioner, you're next.
and how are you going to report and track success on these KSPs?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I skipped over something when we sort of set this up. When I introduced the issue. We have internal management tool that we use to track. We are suggesting and proposing that we do reporting to you twice a year. My assumption is the board would want to do a retreat annually, so we would report certainly as part of that, and we would also report once a year as part of the budget process.
I think that may be beneficial, because as many of us will remember, in our retreat this year, we never finished. It was actually cut short. So I think reporting may help us, prior to a retreat, understand where we were, where we've traveled, and where we need to go to. So thank you.
It's our expectation we would report to you twice a year on this.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hurt?
For the record, can you tell us what the total add to staff is next year with regard to this?
Let me add them up. Melanie, if you go to the next slide, this is where the rubber meets the road here. So this is a summary. And this is a summary of the fiscal year 22 increases if you were to bless what we presented to you today. And we have the staffing counts, they're just not totaled up in here. And I broke it out by general fund, ARPA funding, and then the fire fund. So, and the staffing will be under the general fund and the fire fund. So I've got 2, 3, 5.
I counted 13
I think there's more than that.
in general fund.
Oh, okay.
I have 13.
Yeah.
in general fund. And then we have one additional staff, a lieutenant in the fire fund for the community paramedicine program. And then Chief thinks he can cover the rest of the staffing with overtime. So this really is where the rubber meets the road.
I wasn't done.
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
so
I had a
sorry.
second part.
I'm
No, that's
sorry.
okay. So I appreciate that, just getting that clarified, because it sounded like a lot more than that as you were going through it, so I thought it was important to put the number out there publicly. From a reporting back perspective, I would highly encourage us to figure out how to dashboard this so that we're not reporting twice a year. We're presenting twice a year, but we're reporting progress steadily throughout the year. That's how we institutionalize cultural change, that's how we quality improve, and that's how we can take things off of the list once it's just institutionalized, and then add new things for quality improvement onto the list. So the idea that we could report out twice a year and that I have to go to an Excel spreadsheet to figure out where we are and read notes will not take us as far along as it will if we dashboard. And I think we've allotted money into the budget for programs to dashboard. This ought to be the first thing we attempt to dashboard. That's it.
Any other comments? Okay.
Okay, so we're not, so I do want to direct your attention to the screen and talk a little bit more about this, because there are budgetary impacts, and we're trying, I know you're trying to, I'm sorry, Chairman, but I.
No,
this is the most important-
I'm laughing at Applegate about something else.
Okay,
Don't
all
worry
right.
about it.
So this is the fiscal impact page, and in your formal report, there are several different breakdowns on funding, how much everything's costing, how much it costs by KSP. But this really is a summary report, because we do need to work this into the budget if we want to move forward with this. The impact to the general fund is a little over $800,000. And I don't think we included it in here, but in the formal report that we gave you a forecasting document so you could see, because this program, and Commissioner Hurd, you're correct, there are more staff in here than we're showing in the first year, because some of the staffing grows over the years. In the forecasting document, we included that so you could see sort of bottom line, work that into the forecast that we had given you as part of the budget, so you can understand, because if you start down this road, we certainly want you to continue it, so there will be more costs in the out years. And from a forecasting standpoint, with the budget stabilization money that we're talking about from ARPA, we can do this, including increasing staffing and some other costs over the years, and still stay at around 20% in general fund reserves. I will direct your attention to the fire fund line at the bottom, where we see the ongoing operating costs and supplies is at $22,000. That is instead of the $858,000 that was shown on the slide. Checked with Chief, that is a good number, although he was hopeful that maybe we would go with the 823. He thought that maybe he had a chance. But so what I'm looking for today is a thumbs up. Are we good to incorporate this? You'll certainly take formal action on it at the first public hearing for the budget, but I just want to, before we work this into the budget.
Okay, before we do that, I just wanted to see, is there any public comment here? But remember, after we do this, that what this committee, what the county manager is asking for is a consensus to move forward and to incorporate this into the budget. Okay. With that, is there anybody else that's got a yellow paper that's holding it back?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hold it back. I really didn't remember I would be asked if we could speak.
Okay, Ms. Harmon?
Nancy Harmon, 752 Pioneer Way, Geneva, Florida. This presentation has been very informative. I listened to a lot of the comments. I have comments, but there's one thing that was, Commissioner Zimbauer asked us kind of where are we going, how we know where we went, where we're going, and how do we know we got there. And that's one thing I do not see identified in any of these discussions, and I haven't seen it throughout the time, the past year and a half that I've come to these meetings, is that I hear a lot of things that are happening, are going to happen, In fact, this one, number 9, which was about the engagement with other communities and other groups, I remember distinctly why that happened, and it occurred because it was felt that we were losing our ability to get on top of things because we weren't connecting with these other regional sources. And one of the comments that I heard was, the reason why we can't do this, we don't have staff. So I was really happy. I'm going to jump now to 5, to staff, and say, I'm happy you are finally coming to this board and saying, we need people. Because you can't do anything one level deep. You can't do anything half a person per, a big job. You just can't do it. And the point that was made with regards to the education, before this gets approved, I really would ask that you get these funding line item numbers, estimates updated to reflect what we really, as a citizen, are going to see, so that it doesn't come back later, and I go, what the heck? I mean, education, I was looking at your leadership and your, I'm trying to go over this kind of quick, because I know you guys have been sitting there for a long time. The leadership and the development, I still don't comprehend why they're separate, and I don't understand. I do understand now why training monies went down to the lower level. But again, I see no accountability for how you knew anybody was trained, how you even know that money went there. Working in the government like I do, I know what we used to do with money like that. That's called operation and maintenance, and boom, we spent it for whatever the heck we wanted to or needed to spend it for. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be, from the community standpoint, our ability to do dashboard look or whatever. So I know when I come to one of these meetings, or before I come to one of these meetings, what I want to cheer for and what I say I'd like to see improvement on. Overall, I'll address some of these other things with the commissioners separately, but I really see this as a wonderful step going forward, I think, for our citizens, for myself. I just feel like if everybody can involve themselves or not, I'm choosing to involve myself. And what I'm seeing from being able to be involved, which you have allowed us to do, is that we are taking a hold of our county and we're starting to bring it back to make sure we have qualified people, competent qualified people. They're giving the reasons to want to come to work. They're being reinforced with their jobs. If you don't have people who are happy in their jobs, we aren't going anywhere.
Thank you, Ms. Harmon.
Thank you.
Okay. Nicole, anything else on this? Okay, we know what she has asked for. Is there a motion?
I have a question for the county.
Question.
So, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history, and then it's going to come the question. As board members, we all have hard decisions to make when it comes to the budget. As board members, we all have hard decisions when it comes to approving the budget. I will tell you, back in 07, 08, we had to make some hard decisions with the downturn of the economy, and we had to let over 200 people go, and that's where a lot of this money went. We were just getting back to where we were before 07, 08, and then we had the big rollback from the state in 12 and 13, I think it was. And so that was 5-6 years for us to get back, and then we had to do the big rollback. Now we were getting back to where that was, and then almost 8-9 years afterwards, then we had the pandemic, and that's where we are today. So that's what happened. The boards, as we move forward, didn't just want to cut the budget. We were forced to cut the budget. We had to live within our means. I mean, that was the bottom line. There was a lot of people hurting out there financially. There still is a lot of people hurting out there financially, and we were not going to raise taxes because of that. So the question that I have is, now that we brought back the red line, green line, by adding all of this, what does it do to the red line, green line?
So the red line and the green line,
Because you made a comment that we now have to add this into our budget.
if you want to accomplish the things that are in here, we're going to have to, we need some resources to do that.
Because I believe that looking at the red line, green line, because of the, they call it the American Rescue Act, we were able to suppress that, so we became neutral. So now is this going to make the red line, green line, the red line above the green line?
So let me clarify one thing. Even with the budget stabilization supplement from ARPA, we're still not neutral.
Correct.
The red line is still above the green line. And so this, of course, adds to that. So, but the budget stabilization puts us in a position where that's manageable.
Correct.
And consistent with the reserve discussions that this board has had. So I think and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I did give it to all of you in that forecasting document. I think we're in the neighborhood of when you roll this in, we're in the neighborhood of $2+ million out of balance. And so we would use fund balance to balance that. That's our anticipation. I will remind you that when we get to mid-year, we usually have at least that much in savings, so it's kind of a worst-case scenario exercise there. But my recommendation to you, and thankfully we do have some ARPA funds that we can use for budget stabilization. I actually will be quite honest with you, when we added the numbers up, I was surprised how low it was. I thought it was going to be significantly more. So I was actually pleasantly surprised to see it was under $1 million. I thought we were going to be much further out there than this. I think this is manageable. My recommendation to you would be that you move forward with it. I'm not uncomfortable as your budget officer and the person who has to present the budget to you. I'm not uncomfortable rolling this into the
Mr. Chairman,
With that, Commissioner Zimbauer.
I move a motion that we adopt the staff's recommendation on the fiscal year 22 public hearing adjustments as outlined in this document for $4,586,003 in totality.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Lockhart, did you second it?
I did.
Okay, good. We have a motion and a second to consensus to move forward, to roll this into the budget. Discussion, Commissioner Zimbauer.
So I know what was just said as far as mid-year adjustments and so forth, but here's the reality. Since I've been here, your office has been very conservative in your budget projections. And since I've been here, and if I go back 2 cycles before I was here, you always have more revenue than what is forecasted in your budget. I don't think this year is going to be an exception. So I think we're in a good place.
I think, quite frankly, I think that if we're going to achieve these goals that we have and priorities that we have put out, that we have to obviously spend the resources to do it, and therefore I'm supportive of this, and I concur with what Commissioner Zimbauer said, that every year that I've been here, we've had, at the midpoint, we've had money in the budget that was more than we anticipated as far as, a reserve, and our staff has been very conservative in doing that, and I think that we have to move forward to be able to do this thing, and to do what we want to get done for this community. Commissioner DeLore.
Don't misunderstand my questioning or my comments about a minute or so ago. I just want to make sure that what we're doing is financially manageable. That's why I wanted the county manager to address it. The green line and the red line has to be very important to us at all times. And as long as it's manageable, I'm fine with this.
And trust me, and she said that it is manageable, and if it isn't, she's going to be the one that has to pay.
I don't think she has to pay.
You know what I'm saying.
Mid-year adjustment.
She's going to be,
I'm worried that you're jinxing our mid-year adjustment.
Commissioner Lockhart, I believe, wants to be heard.
Yes, Commissioner Lockhart.
I'm so sorry. I think that, to kind of tag on to Commissioner Zimbauer's comments, something that I've asked for in the past, and I know Commissioner Zimbauer asks for somewhat regularly, is a report on our open positions. And I don't know if lapsed salary dollars have already been figured into your budget, County Manager, but that would be helpful for us to know.
We do an estimate for lapsed salaries. It is baked into the proposed budget. Sometimes we guess right, sometimes we're high, sometimes we're low, but we and actually, Tim's actually usually pretty spot on with that, but we do make an assumption for lapsed salaries.
Yeah, I do, so you're saying that those assumptions, and can you tell us, and that you don't have to know right now, but maybe you could circle back with us and let us know what that figure is that you're assuming for lapsed salary dollars?
Yes, we can do, I can't tell you right now, but we can get that information
Right.
for you.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Herr?
So I think the 2 million that we're going into reserves, about half of that is related to this because it's about $1.1 million by my count outside of ARPA. I think as long as we figure out how to do it on a run rate basis without continually dipping into reserves, I think that's what we're saying
That's
with the
what I'm
red
asking.
line, green
Sure.
line, to be super clear about that. And I think this is an iterative process, so as you're building out the year, you can slow the roll on things. Just have to report back that we're slowing the roll on something and the reason why. I cannot say enough how important it is that we start dashboarding this stuff, because I think it will change the productivity levels within this operation so significantly that this won't be a big discussion in the future. So that's my last thought. And then I'd also like to say that this is a work session, and therefore the official vote on the budget comes later. This is just voting on direction.
This is voting on direction. Correct. And that's what I assumed that the motion was indicating. To roll it to consensus for the staff to continue to move forward with this. All right. Any further debate on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Okay, now, for earlier discussions with the county manager, I think that the next, I believe that you had a 20 to 30-minute presentation on this. Then I'm sure with this
There was
board that there's...
There was a caveat to that. It depends on how many questions.
No, that was yours. Let me finish, please. And then, knowing this board, there was going to be more questions. So what I'm going to do, and I have gotten approval from the attorney to do this, is that we will come back, we will adjourn now and start this at 1 o'clock, because it's a work session. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
So we'll come back at 1 o'clock and start this as part of the work session, with the meeting going 1:30. Mr. Attorney, what do you have?
I just have one item. I would ask that you would approve a motion that the county chairman serve as one of the county's representatives in the mediation ordered by the Federal 11th Circuit in Rivercross Land Company versus Seminole County.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any discussion?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, passes unanimously. Okay, so if everybody's in the current, okay, we're going to adjourn now, or recess now, come back at 1 o'clock, do the American Rescue Act, and then go right into the meeting following that. Is everybody okay with that?
Okay.
Okay, so we're in recess. Thank you very much.